Welcome to Daniel. I wish we were in a live session, either face-to-face or online live, because I'd love to hear you share your first impressions of Daniel and then how that impression may have changed. In a way, we've already been introduced to the situation in the book of Daniel in the course of our survey. Remember, the narrative of Esther demonstrates the threats that were facing the Judean exiles. In Esther, the threat was socio-political. In Daniel, the assaults are more on their spiritual values. It's often a challenge to live out a vital faith in a pagan setting. I mean, the pressures you and I might feel tend to be minimally minimal because of the legal freedoms we enjoy. But there are large swaths of Christ followers in other parts of the world who know firsthand that living for Jesus can be hazardous to one's health. And history is replete with sad examples of Christian communities who've succumbed to the pressure to renounce Christ, and for all practical purposes, the church is being snuffed out in those settings. I mean, one quick example is the once vibrant church in North Africa. It's all but disappeared. Though there are small pockets of believers there. Well, Daniel's perhaps one of the most contested books of the whole Bible. Yeah, there are debates over who wrote it. There are debates over when it was written. There's not much argument over the historical events that are referred to, but as we've seen in other prophetic books like Isaiah, I mean, the very presence of putative prediction forces some to date such after the event. So you'll find scholars dating the book of Daniel to 164 BC. Now, there's also disagreement over the meaning of the visions that are reported in Daniel. Many Christians are surprised to learn that while Daniel is certainly in the Hebrew Bible, it's not situated among the prophetic books, but rather among the writings, along with Job and Psalms and Ecclesiastes and so on. So, what's the theme of the composition of Daniel? My take is that there are two theme tracks. One demonstrates that Yahweh, the God of creation and of history, is indeed on the throne. The other track demonstrates that ultimately pride and evil will be overthrown. A couple of key verses, 7, 13, and 14. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like the Son of Man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples and nations and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. By the way, do you hear tones of the promised covenant? And then another passage from Daniel chapter 12, verse 10. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. Well, let's do the reporter drill. Who? The implied audience. Daniel's people. That's explicit in chapters 8 through 12. But there's also the audience of Gentile nations in chapters 2 through 7. And by the way, chapter 1 and chapters 8 through 12 are written in Hebrew, as one might expect given the implied audience. But chapters 2 through 7 are written in the international trade language of the Gentiles, Aramaic. Who the author? Well, Daniel, also known as Belteshazzar. He was a 6th century statesman and visionary. The autobiographical detail and the fact that the raconteur uses the first person, particularly in chapters 7 through 12, and the use of Aramaic with Persian technical terminology points to a composition during the Persian period. As I've indicated before, an anti-supernatural bias is the primary motivation for reassigning authorship away from a 6th century Daniel and pushing it on into the Maccabean period. See, it's fair to say that this would be the majority view of the Academy. Flavius Josephus, the Jewish historian contemporary with Jesus, regards the Daniel of this book as an historical character. In the Antiquities of the Jews, Book 10, he reports, "But now Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, took some of the most noble of the Jews that were children and kinsmen of Zedekiah their king, such as were remarkable for the beauty of their bodies and the comeliness of their countenances, and delivered them into the hands of tutors, to the improvements to be made by them. He also made some of them to be eunuchs, which course he took also with those of other nations whom he had taken in the flower of their age, and afforded them their diet from his own table, and had them instructed in the institutes of the country, and taught in the learning of the Chaldeans. And they had now exercised themselves sufficiently in that wisdom which he ordered that they should apply themselves to. Now among these were 4 of the family of Zedekiah, one of whom was called Daniel, another Ananias, another Misael, a 4th Azarias. And the king of Babylon changed their names, commanded that they should make use of other names. Daniel he called Baltazar, Ananias Shadrach, Misael Meshach, and Azarias Abednego. These the king had in esteem and continued to love because of the very excellent temper they were of, and because of their application to learning, and the profess they had made in wisdom." Well, not that this would satisfy critical scholarship, but I think it's noteworthy that in Matthew 24, Jesus cites the tagline, "So when you see the abomination of desolations," and then specifies that it was spoken of by the prophet Daniel. Well, I have to deal with that. I'm not comfortable shrugging it off as an accommodation of popular lore. I also have to deal with Jesus' allusion to Daniel in Luke 21, where he agrees that Jerusalem will be the underdog until the times of the Gentiles are completed, and the Son of Man comes back in power and great glory. Well, we'll continue with the reporter questions next session. See you in a bit.